Hi, and welcome to Lepien Life.
This podcast is all about wisdom for daily living, where we talk about marriage, parenting, life, business, and just trying to stay grounded in this busy world.
We're not going to pretend to have all the answers, but we do think it's important to be able to slow down, think about life, and to be able to find out what our purpose is.
So whether you're at the gym or just getting ready to start your day, we're glad that you're here. Let's jump into the conversation. Welcome to another episode of Lepien Life. We are in the middle of a series about balance. In our first episode, we kind of just talked about what balance is. What does our culture say? How do we define it? How can we achieve it? So if you missed that, go back and check it out. Today, we're talking about time management and how to balance ourselves with our time. And this is something that Michael's taught on for several times. I think the first time was back when he was in college, and he got to tell the student leaders how to have time management. So this is something that's near and dear to our hearts. It's natural for him. It's something that I learned. And so let's just kind of jump into it. What is time management? Let's do a quick definition, and then we'll kind of break it down from there.
Yeah, so oftentimes I think we can get overwhelmed when we think about time management. Sometimes I think people are like, well, I don't know what that even means. How do I manage my time? Ultimately, I think time management comes down to self-management. It comes down to how am I actually going to live my life? And so I think if we think in those terms of saying, well, how are we actually going to look at our lives, prioritize the right things, as we talked about in last week's episode, how are we going to prioritize the right things, not prioritize the wrong things, and ultimately help us to get to the best version of ourselves, accomplish our goals, so that we're not just kind of slowly going through this life, just floating by the whims and waves of our feelings. Time management is something that is not going to just happen naturally. There are some people that are natural time managers. Yeah. I'm a natural organizer. Like, I love those types of things. I love writing, doing bullet journaling and all kinds of things. Those will be some tools we talk about later. So for many people, though, they're not natural time managers. They're not natural self-managers. Mm-hmm. And so ultimately, that is what it comes down to. It comes down to self-discipline and saying, here's what I'm going to say yes to. Here's what I'm going to say no to, so that ultimately I can achieve my goals and achieve the things that I want to be able to do. So I'm not sporadic, but I'm actually very focused.
Yeah. I do think it's important to know our personalities, because I really don't want anyone to listen to this and have the excuse of, well, that's just not me.
Sure. Because
that's just not me. Like I in college, I was a procrastinator. All through school, I was a procrastinator, fly by the seat of my pants. That's just kind of like my personality.
Whereas I was the person who, as soon as I got my first day of syllabuses, I went back and had syllabi, had my entire, I bought one of those big desk calendars that could flip the whole page over, and I went through, okay, here's my first syllabus, okay, now I've got a paper due on October 15th, okay, well, I want it done the week before, so I would write that in the calendar, and I would just timeline it all back. Well, I need to be in the library for this day, I need to be in the library on this day, I'm going to have a rough draft due on this day, and then I would grab my next one. And then I would go through the entire semester with all of my syllabi, so that every single semester, basically, I just looked at my daily calendar. So all of my papers were always on time. I never pulled an all-nighter in 4 years of college. I always had everything, when the teacher would be like, hey, everybody didn't get all their stuff done. Everybody's asking for more time because this event happened. I'd be like, actually, I'm already done. So that's fine if you give another week. I'll just keep proofreading it. But at the end of the day, it's fine. So for me, I was very, I just woke up, looked at my calendar and said, oh, I need to go to the library tomorrow. Okay, great. So I'll make sure and do that tomorrow. So we lived very different lives.
We did. I was the student up at 3 a.m. writing the paper at the last minute.
Yeah. I made that mistake once. There was one English paper when I was doing my basics my freshman year that I forgot to do. I didn't put it into my calendar. And so I forgot about it until the night before. And it was a persuasive essay. And so I was like, what is something that I can just pull out of my rear end and write about? And so it was like the necessity of gun hunting. So I was like, what can I talk about? So I'm going to talk about hunting and how hunting is good. And I don't know, our listeners may or may not agree with that. That's fine. But that's what I wrote my persuasive essay about.
Were you in high school?
No, it was my freshman year of college.
What?
So I just forgot. I didn't plug it in, so I didn't know about it until it was too late. So the night before, at 10:30, I was writing this persuasive essay, and I got an A on it. So
there you go. See, it works both systems.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah, worked out great.
I'm teasing. This is something though that honestly, as a procrastinator, it has been a learned skill for me. And I mean, I've had, successful things happen because I learned this skill. So I think it is essential that it just requires a little more self-discipline.
Well, and I think too, like I have a really good friend that in college he pulled lots of all-nighters and all those types of things. And it's funny, like the added pressure of procrastination actually allowed him to be better, right? So there were times, and he and I have talked
Better
about this
under
several
pressure.
times. Yeah, well, it was like there were these times where he's like, I almost can't do things ahead of time because if I do, then I don't feel the pressure, and if I don't feel the pressure, then I'm not going to write as well, for example. And so sometimes that would be an aspect of it. So I totally get that for some people, like having that added pressure. Maybe it's like, well, the due date is actually a week ahead of time. I don't know. I think ultimately a lot of it, remember, time management is self-management. So what it comes down to is how much are you willing to handle stress in your life? Because there are some people that they can't handle that stress. Like I don't want to handle the stress of, as a teacher or a preacher, for example, I'm not going to write my sermon the night before because like I don't want that added stress in my life. I want to be able to lead up to it knowing I'm done, I'm ready to go. Or whatever that might be. So whether that's a work deadline or a family deadline or whatever. So I think some of it does come down to how much stress are you willing to handle? How much stress are you capable of handling? And how much stress can you alleviate in certain areas by saying, I'm just going to get ahead of the curve by disciplining myself, disciplining my time, managing myself and my own thoughts and feelings and experiences so that ultimately I can remove as much stress that is unnecessary in my life.
That's good. Okay, let's kind of just break it down a little bit. So how do you respond to someone whenever they say, I'm just overworked, I'm so busy, and that may truly be the case, but what's your like initial thought when you hear those things?
My initial thought is a great quote from Lee Cockerell, who wrote a book called Time Management Magic. It's a great book. It's probably 150, 180 pages, very easy read, super, super fantastic. Lee Cockerell was, just a little bit of context, he was a vice president at Disney, kind of back in, especially during its heyday, early 2000s and such. He oversaw like 30,000 plus team members, cast members is what they call them. Multiple parks and ESPN complex, all of this. And he writes in, and he actually addresses this question. And he says, most people are not overworked, they are underorganized.
Say it one more time.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to understand because most people, when I've heard somebody say this, well, I've just got too much on my plate. Do you? That's my first question is to go, well, maybe it's not that, maybe you are overworked. Sure, of course. There's certainly that type of person who takes on so much that you're going, okay, there's not enough time in the day for that. Like you need to cut some of that out. But I think that's not most people. I think most people are not managing themselves. And so what Lee Cockerell says is most people are not overworked. They're under-organized. So if you were to sit down and actually write out, okay, here's my job, here's everything that I need to do, here's everything. This is one reason why I like notebooks because it's something, it gets me away from my phone, it gets me away from a device. Writing things down, actually, there's good studies demonstrating that it helps you to remember it better. So for me, it's about writing things down. If I don't write it down, I'm going to forget. We were even talking about some of our podcast recordings, and you were telling me, I reminded you all these times, and I'm like, well, I didn't write it down, and because I didn't write it down, I didn't remember. And so if you're going to write things down, sometimes that's helpful just to get it off of your mind to go, okay, it's all here. Let me organize how much time am I actually spending doing the things that I'm doing. Sometimes I think there's a great principle, in fact, about how long does it take you to do something. In the book Essentialism, I can't remember the author's name, but he talks about where he says any activity that you think you're going to do, go ahead and add 50% more time to it. So if you think it's going to take you 10 minutes to drive across town to that appointment, add 50% of that, add 5 more minutes, and now I'm going to schedule 15 minutes. I think this is so funny because with so many activities in different organizations and groups that we've been in for work, when somebody says, oh, well, we can do that in an hour, I'm like, okay, well, I had 50% of that. And sometimes people are really bad judges. You go, okay, double that. It's going to take us 2 hours to do that instead. So I think that is a big aspect of our lives, that most people they really aren't overworked. They're just underorganized. They're not organizing their life. They're not organizing their time and their responsibilities and organizing them in such a way that they can't accomplish it, either because they're overestimating their abilities or they're underestimating the amount of time they actually have. Yeah. So I think that's important for us to think about too.
Yeah. So is there a tool that you use as far as like prioritizing the work? Like, is there What is something that?
Yeah, so for me, in my time management tool, I use what's called the bullet journal. And so others, there's obviously digital tools, and I've tried lots of different digital tools in the past. For me, what I've kind of landed on, and sometimes that shifts for me, right at the very top of the bullet journal method, for me and my daily log is to say, what are my top 3 priorities for the day? What are the top 3 things that it doesn't matter? All these other things I can push to tomorrow or the next day or the next day or even next week. But I'm going to actually write in the 3 things that are my top priorities, and then I'm going to time block how much time I expect to spend on those. Now, for some people, I'm already losing you because you're just like, ugh, I don't want to think about that.
I am that person. Like the bullet journal system, I would not be able to do.
Which it is very, very simple. Mm-hmm. Like I add things to it because for me, I'm like, well, I want a little bit more complexity than just putting, the bullet journal system is an actual, maybe we can link to it or something. Yeah. It is an actual system really of how you make certain notes. A dot is a task. A dash is an event, mm-hmm. So it's just a certain method, but it's super, super simple. That's all that it is. Take any piece of paper and you can turn it into a bullet journal method. But for me, placing right at the top those top 3 priorities and then time blocking those times in to say, okay, I'm actually going to be intentional. Like that's the thing. Time management doesn't happen by itself. Time management is about intentionality. It's about you taking control of the time that you have in this 24-hour period and saying, I'm going to determine what's going to happen in this time period, not letting life determine what's going to happen to me in this 24 hours, right? Now, granted, you can't control all things, but I can control as much as I can how I'm going to spend my day. So I'm going to be intentional about this particular activity that I know this is my top priority for the day. And when I stop for 30 seconds and think about it, like I'm not spending an hour planning out my day. I'm taking 5 minutes at the start of the day, 10 minutes at the end at the beginning of a week and going, what are my top priorities this week? And then saying, I think that I can genuinely get this activity done in an hour. Okay, well, at what point in the day do I want to do that? Well, I think based on my other appointments and events and things I need to get done, I'm going to do that from 9 to 10 o'clock. I'm going to block that time in. That's what I'm working on. From 9 to 10, I'm not checking emails. I'm not checking text messages. If that means you have a great tool, if you need to turn on like a focus mode on your phone. I know you do that. Maybe you can mention that.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
I don't do that, but for the most part, like I'm not doing anything else in that time block except working on this particular task, and I'm going to work on it until I'm done with it. Now, if that means I need to make adjustments, if it's taking more time, then I'll do that later. But otherwise, I actually find that I overestimate the amount of time it takes. So I'm done in 35 minutes. So great, I've got 25 minutes to check email or catch up on something else. So I think for me, that's a really helpful way of kind of saying, okay, these are my priorities. All these other things that are on my checklist, I can move those and move them to tomorrow and migrate them if I need to. But at the end of the day, these are the top 3 things that I need to get done each day.
Yeah. I think on the flip side, since we're talking about tools a little bit, the bullet journal to me feels like a task. Mm-hmm. And so then I know it will get buried because it's something manual that I have to do. For me, I do automation as much as possible. Sure. Just because that's my personality. I know that if reminders and things don't get automated for me, if the time blocks for those reminders don't get automated for me, then they're going to fall to the wayside.
Sure.
So I actually just revamped my whole system. I was using just my Google calendars. I had, for those that don't know, I do real estate. I'm a marketing manager for a female church leader organization, homeschool our kids, and I'm a director for that. And, and then the family stuff of just organizing. So I have those 4 calendars that I manage, real estate, the female church leader, and then family and homeschool. And so I have all of those synced together on Google, and I was just using those calendars and my Apple reminders. Just, hey Siri, remind me. Hey Siri, remind me. And that was my system for a long time. And then
which is not really much of a system.
No, it was not. It was I didn't want to put money into it,
sure.
And I didn't want to put time into it, honestly, because I knew that it would take a whole lot of time to really build what I needed. So I just revamped, and I switched to Motion, which you told me about, and when you were looking into just different things. And Motion is a digital calendar that AI automates a lot of things for you. And then I made a Trello board for my real estate reminders so that things are there's a lot of automations that I built into that so that it automatically just blocks time on my calendar. So that's those are just a high view of the system I use. So I am digital he's not, and so
I like being more analog. And it's not that I haven't done digital systems before.
Sure.
I've used different ones before, but what I found is that oftentimes it was still distracting. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you look at your phone to find your next to-do list and, I've got a notification here, or I've got this going, well, let me check this. And 10 minutes goes by and you're going, well, what did I pick up my phone for? Or what did I look in this messaging app for, or whatever? And I think for me, too, even coming back to an analog system. Now, some of the things that I do, I think your idea of the bullet journal from what I'm doing is like how I draw out certain days and all these. Like, that's not the bullet journal method. That's just how I like to visualize it on a piece of paper.
But you do draw out your calendar.
Yeah, I do. I love that because it makes me feel like I'm in control of my time.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, it's not a task. It is a thing that makes me feel in control of my life. And that's ultimately, I think, what a lot of time management stuff does. And what I didn't, I think, like as much about like the Motion AI, where like if you add in something, this is a priority event, then it bumps automatically your tasks to the next day and whatever. And for me, I felt like that wasn't as much as control as what I wanted. Like I wanted to be intentional about when I'm doing a task. I understand that not everybody's like that. So I think that's the difference and maybe helpful for our listeners as well. But for me, it was like when I pick up a pen and put it to paper, there is that tangible scratching on the pen, of the paper. And being intentional about saying, this is what I'm going to do. Not everything needs to be written down.
Yeah.
Right? Not every task is important enough even to go into your daily log. But to be able to say, no, this is something that I want to prioritize makes me feel like I'm more in control of my time, at least in as much control as I possibly can be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so let's go back to rewind a little bit to when you talked about your priorities and your top 3 priorities. How do you determine what's urgent, what's important, how do you determine the categories of what you need to do?
Well, I think you kind of answered the question. I mean what are my priorities for the day are determined by 2 different categories: things that are urgent and things that are important. So my priorities for that day, urgent and important. Well, something is urgent if it requires immediate attention. So it's a deadline. Like, okay, this is due tomorrow. I have a meeting tomorrow, and I need to have a presentation ready for it. It's urgent. That's pretty urgent, especially if I haven't started on it because you procrastinated. I've been done for a week, but so I'm not worried about it. It's urgent in the sense that it's time. It's coming up quickly. Something is important if it helps you achieve your overall goal in life. So maybe that's to be whether that's something broad like to become a more devoted father or a more loving husband. Okay, so well then that means whatever that might be. Maybe you want to certain financial goals for your business. Whatever that might look like. It's important because it helps me achieve that overall goal. It's not necessarily urgent. So maybe that's building relationships with people in the community. Maybe that's going on dates. Maybe that's doing game nights with our family because we want to have a close relationship with our kids. Well, it's not necessarily urgent. Our kids aren't moving out tomorrow, right? But it's important because it helps us achieve our overall goal. It's one next step that actually helps us to move us in that direction. So I think when you're determining what are my priorities for today and what are my priorities for the week, you answer that question by first going, well, what's urgent? What are the things that are right now that I need to get done? And then secondly, what are those things that help me achieve my overall goals so that ultimately I'm fulfilling my priorities so that at the end of each week. And I would also say that, like, sometimes people ask, well, how far out in advance do you plan? A year is often too far. A month is pretty good. So I have a monthly calendar. You have a monthly calendar. We're putting things, okay, well, this thing needs to be done in 3 weeks. Okay, that's great. But typically, I think the week is the perfect timetable because, okay, well, that still gives me several days before I need to work on that or before that's going to be done. And of course, the day is too short. If you're only planning day by day, well, then you're always going to be on urgent.
Yeah. Are you speaking about just like rhythmic tasks?
Yeah, I think so. And especially, it's helpful for big things, like even referencing back to when we were in college, like I would say, okay, well, the big thing is I have to get this paper done. Well, there's lots of little steps that it takes. There's lots of little tasks.
So the paper, though, is a months in advance.
That's right.
It's coming.
That's right.
But so you build that So you are planning further in advance.
Yes,
it's
that's
just
right.
your rhythmic tasks to lead up to that point.
That's right. If you have a major if you're talking about project management, that's probably something that's a little bit more akin to this.
Okay.
Like in that sense, it is project management. But for your day to day, the things that I need to get these things done for my job, my work, my family, all of those things. Like the week to the month, like planning maybe for a month, but then sort of living week to week. Can be helpful because that does help you to look ahead. Like I always take usually a Sunday evening before I go to bed. I'm reflecting on the week before. I write a few 2 or 3 sentences in my journal and just say, well, let me reflect on the last week. How did I feel about the week? And then I start looking at my calendar for the next week.
Yeah.
And I start going, what tasks do I need to get done this week based upon what's happening in the month? So now I'm going to flesh those things out. I'm going to assign this task to be done on Thursday. I'm going to assign this meeting on Tuesday if I didn't already have that meeting on the calendar. These are the tasks I'm going to do each day so that at the end of the week I can look back and say I've accomplished my priorities.
Yeah. I don't know what you think about. So I do a lot of bulk planning. I don't know if it's my personality.
What do you mean by bulk planning?
I'm going to break it down a little bit. So I have to force myself to carve out time. And so like even just setting up my new systems for automation, I took a day to build out the automations in Trello and like test run it, make sure that as I check these boxes, it's going to do what I want it to do, And so I do like that's a bulk planning where I just like took a whole day, put my nose to the grindstone and built the system. Another one is like school. So we're directing Caden's class, this starting this fall, and I bulk plan the entire school year. Like this is who's doing what and when. This is when this assignment's done. So I have this like bird's eye view of what each week is going to look like. But then I'm going to do 6-week chunks of content. Like, okay, I have to digest all this content for this 6 weeks so that I'm prepared for class. So I would call those like bulk planning. And then the week to week is like easy. I just have to look at my bird's eye view and see like this is what's happening. I need to go and look at the chapters that we're supposed to read, do a refresh on what I'd already bulk digested. And then so that my weekly rhythm, I can just plug and go. Does that make sense? I don't know what you think about that as far as like what you were talking about with the daily task. Is that more of like the project management?
I don't ever do that.
Maybe it's a personality thing.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. I think some of that is probably going to be determinate upon how well you focus on something. Like,
Yeah.
I think, for you, maybe like how we like to say sometimes, like, just take the bull by the horn, get it done. Like, for you,
Yeah.
it's about checking that off the list of going, okay, I'm just going to take the entire day. Like, that sounds awful to me because I feel like at that point now there's going to be lots of things that are going to be left off of my to-do list because I have all these other things that I need to get done on a daily basis. And so if I take the entire day, which is probably one reason why I like the bullet journal system, because in that sense it is actually rather simple.
Yeah.
Because I don't have to draw out the weeks and days and maps and all that stuff if I don't want to. I do that because I like it. But at the end of the day, it's just a bullet system. That's it for keeping track of the tasks and the meetings and events and thoughts and emotions you have throughout the day. So for me, what I would say with bulk stuff, that may speak to more personality. That maybe for some listeners that is exactly what they would need to do. Like, I never thought about doing that. Like, okay, I'm going to clear my calendar, take an entire day and actually do that. Now I think maybe some things that I have participated in that would be considered a bulk thing would be like training days, or something like that, where it's like, okay, we're going to this is going to be a work retreat so that all day we're not doing tasks, we're not doing anything else, we're focused on this. We're going to talk about marketing all day, whatever that might be, and we're going to work through a lot of procedures. We're going to work through a lot of things, and so that at the end of the day, this whole big thing is accomplished. So I think it maybe depends on what the final task actually is. Can this be broken up over the course of several weeks, or is this something that I need to chisel out an entire day and focus all of my attention on? So that may just be determined by whatever that particular task actually is.
I think for me, like if it's worth it so that my daily life is improved because I have done the preparation in advance, and that means I can just like when we get to the school year, I can just like press go, and it's not like a weekly deep preparation every single week. Like that kills me. So maybe that's my personality teaching myself to, if I kill myself for a day or two
Sure.
in the
Yeah,
summertime,
I get that.
so that the rest of the school year is easier.
Yeah.
That's kind of my thought behind it.
Yeah.
I kind of want to ask a little bit about what if someone's living in the urgent and they just feel like they can't get their head above water. I don't know if you want to talk about the quadrants at all and just kind of.
Yeah. So Stephen Covey talks about this in his book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And he has a whole chapter. One of the habits is, about time management primarily is what it's about. And what he does is he has a 4 quadrants for our viewers online, watching on YouTube or something, can be able to maybe picture that. Maybe we can throw up a graphic. Or
above the horizontal line is important.
Yes.
Below the horizontal line is not important.
Correct.
The left hand is urgent.
Yes.
The right hand.
And the right hand side, the right hand
urgent.
column is not urgent. So column 1, things that are important, things that are urgent. Quadrant 2 are things that are important, but they're not urgent. Quadrant 3, bottom left, are things that are not important, but it is urgent. And then quadrant 4 are things that neither of those, they're not important and it's not urgent at all. So just very briefly, quadrant 1, if it's important but it's also urgent, that means it is on fire. I mean, it is like, oh, this demands my attention.
Right.
It is important. It's a deadline, and it is very important. Quadrant 2 are things that are, it's important, but it's not.
Like going on dates to keep your marriage alive.
Right. I mean, it's important, but it's not urgent. Your marriage isn't about to fall apart.
Right now.
It's things like your devotional time. It's things like prayer, and it's things like good spiritual habits in your life. Well, you're not about to walk away from your faith, hopefully. Yeah. But it's helping perpetuate. It's things like exercise and things like that. You're not hopefully in danger of having a heart attack tomorrow. But for long-term health, it's not urgent, but it is important.
Yeah.
Quadrant 3 of those things that are, it's urgent, but it's not important. So it's like those things that you go, these are interruptions in my day. These are things that, like, somebody texts me and immediately wants my attention. It's somebody coming to your office and saying, hey, you got a minute? Sure. Of course, unless you're willing to say no in that instance. It's your friend calling you and saying, hey, I'm really upset because I've got this bad thing going on in my life. Well, you're probably going to drop what you're doing and help that person. It's urgent. In that case, it may even be important, but in some instances, it's not important. It's just an interruption in our day. And then finally, quadrant 4 are complete time wasters. They're activities that are not important and they're not urgent. So at the end of the day, you don't want to live in quadrant 3 and 4, because even though quadrant 3 is urgent, it's not important. So if you constantly live your life doing activities that are not important, then you'll ultimately never achieve any goals. Because remember, redefining again what important means. If it's important, if it helps you achieve your overall goal. So if you're spending all your time not doing things that help you achieve your goals, then you're never going to achieve those goals.
Yeah.
But to your question, now that we've explained the concept of the 4 quadrants, if you're spending all of your time in quadrant 1, if everything is urgent and everything is important, then that means your life is chaos, right? And that's where burnout lives.
Yeah.
If you're constantly living your life on edge because you're so out of control that you have such a lack of control of your life that everything is important and everything is urgent. Well, either one, you have a bad perspective on your activities, and maybe you think that they're urgent and you think that they're important when it's like, hey, calm down. You still got a month to finish that paper. Yeah. Okay, speaking back to my college days. So either you have a bad perspective on your activities, or you really do have too many things going on in your life, or you're not planning far enough ahead. That's oftentimes where I find most people. Because where you really want to set up shop is you want to live in quadrant 2. You want to spend your days prioritizing things that are important, but they're not urgent. And the more time you spend in quadrant 2, the more you live your life in quadrant 2, where I'm doing things that are important, but they're not urgent, the less time you'll spend in quadrant 1, right? Because if you're planning far enough ahead, then, and I know that may seem contradictory to what I said earlier about like planning by the week, it's still good to look ahead to the year and the month. Obviously, that's still good. But just where you live is pretty much like in the day-to-day. Right. Like I'm not thinking about tasks I'm going to do in January of 2026. Right. I'm thinking about the tasks I'm going to do this week. Right. But when you're planning for big things ahead, when you know they're coming, gosh, like put that out and then work backwards to say, what can I do to live in quadrant 2 so I'm not having to live in quadrant 1? Because the more time you spend in quadrant 1, the more burnout you are. Now, one last point about that. When you spend a whole lot of time in quadrant 1, everything's urgent, everything's important.
Yeah.
Then ultimately, when those activities are concluded, we end up oftentimes going and living in quadrant 4, activities that are not urgent and are not important because we think we deserve it, right? Because, man, I've worked so hard.
Or we've lost the motivation.
Or, sure, I mean, yeah, we lost motivation,
real.
or we think we've earned a reward. So we're going to step back into these things, and we're going to say, I'm going to set up shop here. And what happens is then we end up staying too long. We stay in quadrant 4 too long. And as a result, we're spending all of our time binge watching Netflix and, watching HBO Max and watching TV, time wasters, all these types of things that are just pointless wastes of time most of the time. And then what happens is because we spend too much time in quadrant 4, we go right back into quadrant 1 because, I didn't spend enough time in quadrant 2 preparing for this particular event or this particular task. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, it means that we spend a great deal of time wasting our lives away because everything is urgent, and so it causes more stress. It just becomes a snowball effect.
Yeah.
So I think, coming back to your question, for somebody who feels like they're underwater, what they really have to do is slow down, look at your life, write some things down, and then say, okay, how can I transition some of these tasks to quadrant 2? How can I start planning ahead for things that are going to happen in the future so that I can better be prepared so I spend less time in quadrant 1?
Yeah. And I would say that's what I've learned over time and still have to fight for,
Sure.
honestly. My personality is a tendency to live in the urgent and important, and I don't know if that's just I have a D personality on the DISC personality. I have an Enneagram 8. If you relate to that, like if I live in the quadrant 1, urgent and important, then it's not necessarily that I'm like, I feel like I earned a reward, but it's like I have to detox from the level of engagement that I was just at.
Sure.
And it's almost like a recoup. And then I have to force myself out of the recoup to go back to quadrant 2.
Sure.
And live in the important, and being intentional. So I think that is a personality thing, maybe.
Sure.
So if
Sure.
I don't want people to feel like, I'm, living in quadrant 1 and it's because I'm, whatever. That it is like it's a natural thing for some people, and we just have to teach ourselves and have the self-discipline to tell yourself, pull yourself out, tell yourself to do things, force yourself to do things. It is
and I think too, I mean, clearly there are tasks. If everybody spends some time in quadrant 1, it's not bad to be in quadrant 1, right? Like everybody spends some time there because eventually if you have a task if you have a due date, the closer you get to that due date.
No, but I'm talking about seasons when I like live in quadrant 1 and then it's like I crash afterwards.
Yes, yeah. And that and again, that is that idea of going, I deserve a reward, I've spent so much time there, I'm going to rest, and we think of rest as being quadrant 4, when in reality rest is quadrant 2, right? Like to spend time. I had somebody ask me that. I taught this one time to a staff, and one of the questions by a really driven individual was like, so where does rest come with that, like purposeful rest? And I said, well, that's the key. It's purposeful, right? Like if you're going to take time, even for us, we talked about that in episode 1 of this series, that we sometimes book time in our calendars to say we're going to take time to rest. We're not doing anything. We're and in a sense that, and it's not like we're just sitting on a couch watching movies all day long. That's not rest for us. Like that's working in the yard.
We'll talk about rest.
It's doing something refreshing for us. And so in that sense, it is important. And so that is the aspect where it is still something I'm in control of. I'm not allowing laziness to creep into my life and control what I do and my actions, but rather I'm being intentional about saying, no, I'm purposefully spending rest so that even though it's not urgent, I don't want to get burned out. I don't want to wear myself out, and I want to have energy the next time I have a major thing to come up. So even rest, I would say purposeful rest, is actually a quadrant 2 activity because you're recovering.
You have to, force yourself to do it. Okay, a little lighthearted question and maybe some application if you have like a tip. What are some of your time wasters for you personally? And then how do you overcome them?
I wasn't quite expecting the personal aspect of that.
Do you want me to go first?
Personal time waste. Yeah, sure. Go ahead and
okay,
share
while
some of
you
yours.
stew on that question. So
I don't waste time, so that's just how I'm always in control of what I do. Yeah.
In the work world, for me, the easy time waster is my email. Like it is just, there's so much coming into my inbox. So that's just a not necessarily lighthearted. It's more practical. And I just built in filters to filter out the junk so that I have updates and promotions and all the Google filters that I could find, so that my inbox is actually like things that I should look at. And then I take time to go through the other folders, but that is not a daily thing, so that's just a easy tip. So at work, my email is that's a big time waster, or it could be if I let it. Personally, I think I was kind of debating. I think social media could be, but really, whenever you're juggling so much or you're living in a busy life, sometimes I don't even have time to get on Instagram unless it's for work. I'm posting something for real estate or something like that. But that is one that is a go-to. If we're just like sitting at home in the living room, I'll open Instagram and I could just get lost scrolling, And so I do think, like, I don't have notifications turned on for any social media app.
Sure.
I set my phone to personal time, so that at 7:00 at night, it automatically goes to personal time, and I don't get any notifications unless it's from someone within our immediate family,
Sure.
or
like
my
a
mom.
favorite or something.
Yeah. So that's an easy go-to, though, is social media. But then also, like, we like to play video games. We play Mario or Zelda or something. So that can be a time waster. And whenever you're the parent and you have the time code, you can just put it in and keep going. So that's something I would just say it's like a self-discipline thing. Like, okay,
Sure.
I've played enough.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any other ones that you would add to that.
I don't know. I mean, like, my first response, like, I know we kind of laughed about it, but I really don't feel like anything immediately comes to my mind that, this is an immediate time waster for me. I feel like because I am so much constantly thinking about my time, that I'm constantly going, if I'm sitting down and playing a Zelda for, a little bit of time, then, okay, I'll do that for a little bit, but I immediately go, okay, that's enough. I'm going to move on to something else. Like, I don't ever find myself going, oh, look at all this time I'm wasting. And I think because, like, I really don't get on social media all that much. I mean, I primarily only have Facebook.
Just old.
Well, it's a waste of time. It's like, I'm in my 40s now. I'm not going to waste my time scrolling on things. And so, like, there's a number of things that I've cut out of my life over the last few years, and even recently, some things that I'm just like, no, I'm not going to have that in my life. I'm going to spend more time reading. I spend a great deal of time reading. I spend a great deal of time writing out in notebooks and different things, and spending time with wise people from the past. That's what I enjoy doing, though.
Yeah.
So for me, it's not really so much, like, for me, those things actually can become maybe not time wasters, but distractions from other things that are just as important, which is my family. Right? Like, it's easy for me to get lost in a book and spend time reading Josephus or something, which is what I'm reading right now, or Irenaeus, some of the church fathers, and spending time going, no, this is how I'm spending my time. I'm spending time in these things. So for me, I'm almost the exact opposite. It's not that I have a bunch of time wasters that I go, oh, these are time wasters. For me, it's going, oh, no. These are actually good things that I'm spending my time doing. I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm studying. I love that. But it's keeping me from other things, like I'm missing time with my kids. Right. So in that sense, it's not a time waster. In that sense, those things become time consumers, so that then I don't have the time to spend with my kids, or with you, or something of that nature. So I think that maybe for some listeners, if they're driven about particular things, maybe it's work, and they would go, nope, they're working sun up to sundown. So they're going, I don't have any time wasters, so I'm good. But are you having a time consumer?
I would say that about my work. It could be a time consumer for
Absolutely.
me, for sure.
Because again, I think you're being generous about yourself. You're not I don't think of you as a time waster. I think you're purposeful with that. I think you're very intentional about the times you spend with resting and having fun and those types of things. You're a much more fun person than I am. So I'm boring. I like to read. I'm like Bilbo Baggins. I like my armchair and my books and my fire, and I'm good to go. So I think in that sense that can be helpful for people to maybe think not just in terms of time wasters, but time consumers as well.
That's good. That's good to point out. Any final thoughts? Anything from the Stoics or from,
just ancient philosophy?
Anything that
you put ancient on anything and everybody likes it nowadays. So as long as you call it ancient, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Well, I did have a quote that I thought was good for me, and I think from Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations, he's got a great thought here. He says, "It would be wrong for anything to stand between you and attaining goodness. Now, he is speaking about goodness here, not necessarily time management, but think about the principle that he's saying here. He says it would be wrong for anything to stand between you and attaining goodness. Think about maybe your goals. If goodness is your goal, then what am I prioritizing? Don't let anything stand in between you and that. Anything at all. And then he describes some things. He says the applause of the crowd, high office, wealth, self-indulgence, all of them might seem to be compatible with it for a while, but suddenly they control us and sweep us away, these other things that we prioritize, that we think are important. So make your choice straightforwardly, once and for all, and stick to it. Choose what is best. And now he's specifically talking about goodness and virtue, and I think that's good for us and all of our listeners to do. But I think part of virtue is self-discipline. And self-discipline is regarded as how am I going to spend my time? So if we're going to do that, so many of these things that we often think are good, the applause of the crowd, high office, wealth, self-indulgence, all the things that we actually like, we think, oh, okay, well, I can pursue those things and still attain my goals, when in reality, those things often end up controlling us, is what he says. So Marcus Aurelius just kind of leaves us with that thought of saying, no, you need to make the decision and make it straightforwardly and then move on with it. And so that's what I would challenge our listeners with. If you feel like your life's out of control, take control of your life. Choose to say, you know what, I'm not a naturally organized. You're not a naturally organized person, but you've chosen to take the steps necessary to organize your life to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. Right. And not to allow laziness and apathy to creep into us. I think we deceive ourselves by thinking none of this is really important because, well, we have food in our pantries, we've got nice iPhones and Android phones in our pockets, like, hey, life is good. Why do I need goals? Why do I need to even think about, I don't need to plan my life. I'm good. I've got my 8 to 5. I'm making money, and I've got these nice little things. Like, we really don't have a lot of needs in our lives. We have a lot of first world problems, but we don't really have any needs. And so as a result of that, apathy can quickly ease into our lives as individuals, especially living here in America. So I think in that sense, that's the danger that we need to avoid. We need to make a decision, and we need to say, okay, I'm going to not let things get out of control, but I am going to be in control and be intentional about how I'm spending my time so that my life ultimately does achieve an end that is actually worthy of my attention. So I think that that's a good reminder for us today.
Yeah, that is good. Well, that's it for this episode of time management. I hope that you were able to glean some tips, maybe some wisdom. I just want to encourage you to ask yourself, what is it that I need to trim? What is it that I need to analyze? And then pray for that self-control, that the Holy Spirit would fill you to be able to take control of your thoughts and your mind and your actions, to be able to equip yourself to manage your time well.
All right. Well, thanks for spending your time with us today.
If something in this episode resonated with you, feel free to share it with a friend. Leave us a review, like and subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. We're here to help you live life to the fullest.
Yeah, because every day it's not about living perfectly. It's just about living life well. And so that's our goal with every single one of these episodes.
We'll see you next time on Lepien Life.